literally, it's the easiest time to buy a house right now than it's been in the last 5 years.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Mortgage Minute. And if you're new to this show or you've been with us for a long time, you know this show isn't just about interest rates. We are here to help people find practical solutions to mortgage problems in this world. And we always just share current information just to be able to help you understand why rates are the way that they are, and why the economy is doing what it's doing. So we are both real estate professionals, as you know. My name is Matt Thomas. I'm a local real estate agent, have been for starting my 15th year. And Brian is in his 20th year, or maybe his 21st year. Either way, it's a lot. And just wanted to introduce ourselves yet again. And Brian, I think we'll just jump right into it. You have some real-time topics that you wanted to go over, which I think, again, help us understand what's going on in the mortgage world. And then we did want to talk, as we always do, about these solutions that I mentioned, how our clients are, getting through today's market. So with that, Brian, welcome. And Brian, you had a couple things, kind of hot topics that you wanted to discuss.
Yeah. So let's kind of start with the news from the Federal Reserve, right? Today is November 2nd, 2023. Yesterday, the Fed had decided not to raise interest rates, which is a good sign for really anything economically.
Sure.
We've if anybody's seen the show more than once, it's not uncommon for us, or me in particular, to kind of pick on the Fed a little bit, because they really just have their heads so far up there, right? Like and I don't know if it's just sort of an end game, or who knows what the heck else. We're not going to get into conspiracy theories on this channel by any means, but nonetheless, they really have been missing the mark, right? Most of the Fed are a bunch of attorneys and not economists. And oddly, I don't know how I can find this data and they can't, but I wanted to share a few sort of hot topics a little bit. So, a lot of what the Fed is trying to do is continue to raise rates so they can slow down inflation, right? And for a lot of practical purpose, their intent for that has been well received, I suppose, from markets, right? Like the overall inflation is down a little bit. That doesn't necessarily mean I can notice a difference when I go to fill up my car or my truck or go to the grocery store by any means, but a lot of the data that they're looking at has started to improve a little bit. The one thing that the Fed is holding on to when it comes to them pursuing to, or continuing to pursue raising interest rates, is employment data, right? And they have this all wrong. They think the economy is still too strong. They think the job market is still too strong. And I wanted to shed some light on that a little bit. And in hopes that once they get their act together with this, we're going to start to see rates finally come back down. They're meeting again in December. A lot of experts that I've spoken to and have heard from really think that the rising of interest rates from a Fed level is behind us. There's one more meeting in December. We'll see if that holds true or not. But getting back to my point of why they continue to do what they do, has a lot to do with employment data or unemployment data. So let me give you an example. The unemployment data for September comes out later on in October. So the unemployment data comes from BLS, which is Bureau of Labor Statistics. We've talked about that before. It's another government entity. Imagine that. And they reported 336,000 new jobs for the month of September. The estimate was 170, so it came in substantially higher than their estimate. But here's the tricky part to that. In September, there were 1.2 million new second jobs. In other words, people going out and finding their second job, right? Whether they're, be it a DoorDash delivery folks or Amazon, who knows, right? They're taking out a second job. Full-time employment went down 885,000. So that's the difference of the 336 number that was posted. They're looking at it all wrong. The second job shouldn't have that big of an impact on what the Fed's decisions are. But here we are.
It's not that simple.
Yep, 100%. So we won't get into all the additional details. There's some other things that need to happen in order for, their rates to come back down, the Fed rate to come back down. But all signs sort of point to that, right? Between, spending and credit card balances and credit card interest rates and everything else, we're not in a good position financially. Most households are struggling more than they have in a long time, and a lot of it's at record levels. So, to that tune, the Fed really needs to get their act together and stop raising interest rates, and start to lower them, right? Once that starts to happen, lots of good things will start to happen from a a value number. When it comes to real estates, there's so much pent up demand right now for folks wanting to move. Total side conversation that we can have at a later date, or certainly in a one-on-one situation. But I've got lots of really cool, neat ideas to help folks improve their financial situation by either selling their house and buying another one, even with going from a 3.25 rate up to 7.5 or whatever the numbers are. There's some really cool pieces that I have on my website that I can show folks how to, kind of utilize some of that. So, anyway, like I said, don't have
Yeah,
time.
well, I mean, that's much appreciated because Brian, as long as I've known you, you've, obviously your specialty is originating loans and helping people find, mortgage solutions, but really, along a big piece of that is just, advising sort of people on financially and helping them understand how to improve their financial situation. And it goes hand in hand certainly with mortgages and real estate. But yeah, that's great. So, if you're watching, if you're new to this, whatever the case is, Brian is a great resource for many things financially, not just the mortgage side of things.
One last little bit we can touch on. I've seen a lot of this lately, and not to cross promote too highly, but if anybody is a fan of Ryan Serhant, he's a kind of a TV guru. He's a big time New York agent, and he's got a wonderful Instagram.
From Colorado, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Very colorful dude, right? He's a self explained introvert, but he's really exciting to listen to. I read his book, actually listened to the audio book.
Yeah, it's a great book, actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
But he had a really good point recently on Instagram, and I urge anybody to go kind of do a quick search and find it. And he
we'll show it here, actually, or
okay. Yeah,
it is a great video. Anyway, I'll let you get to it.
Yeah, just some neat ideas in terms of, again, we've talked about this before. In any sort of a market, there's going to be some opportunity somewhere. And I feel like right now there's some opportunities to not have to overpay, to get your inspection items fixed. We're doing a lot of temporary rate buy downs right now for folks where the seller is funding it. So we can get a little bit better interest rate in anticipation, right? Crossing our fingers that rates get better over the next 12 to 24 months or whatever. Where we can refi, right? It's always easy to renegotiate the mortgage if rates come down, but we can't renegotiate the price after we've already purchased the house. So anyway, some really good ideas and stuff there, along with some of the other tools that I mentioned in terms of some consolidation methods and ideas and things along those lines. There's some folks that are going to come out of this looking really, really pretty at some point.
Yeah, we have talked many, many times. We've gone into in quite a bit of depth just about rate buy downs in particular. We've alluded to them. We've mentioned them on the show, but we actually have specific videos about rate buy downs and trying to kind of really dissect them and illustrate how beneficial they can be to a buyer in this market. Yep. What I think is important to rehash even at this point is to say that another way of thinking of a rate buy down is a seller subsidy. And when you think of it that way, it's literally the seller giving money to the buyer that goes. It doesn't exactly transfer to your bank account, but it sort of does because there is basically an escrow account that this is being held in that pays portions of your mortgage for a certain time on your behalf, and so that money really does offset your costs as a buyer, and it is yours to exhaust essentially. The other thing that I think I've run into lately is I don't think people understand that a lot of times, depending on the loan type that you have, you can have as much as 3 to 6% contributed to a loan that can come in the form of closing costs essentially. So there's a lot of money that can be offered to a buyer by a seller, and a seller might choose to do that one because it makes things more affordable, and therefore the buyer can buy, and it's a win-win in that regard. It also keeps sellers from having to do price reductions. Works essentially the same. Obviously that's money that they're giving up, but it helps the buyer in ways that they wouldn't be able to. I mean, honestly, without a rate buy down right now, I see very few people buying just at a full rate, right? I mean, whatever that full rate is. And because that fluctuates day to day, we don't really quote rates too often on this show. But to have that money to offset the cost right now is really crucial. And it's really becoming a phenomenal tool, always has been. And it really, if you stop and think about it as a subsidy, like literally the seller's giving money to the buyer takes that money and has that to spend on their mortgage until that money is exhausted. And so this is not only how people are getting by, but I think it really, if you think about the financial benefits of that, it's pretty tremendous. I mean, if somebody said it, like, give you 16 grand for you to be able to help pay your mortgage for the next couple of years, that's just awesome. I mean, why not? Who wouldn't? And that's essentially what it is and what it does. So,
And I'll add to that real quickly too, just to kind of look at dollars and cents. And it's really easy to look at any specific situation, right? But just globally speaking, if let's just say the 16K number that you just threw out there, 100 times out of 100, from a payment standpoint and a cash standpoint, when we look at, cash to close and a payment on their new house, 100 times out of 100, the payment and the cash is going to be less by taking that subsidy or concession from the seller than it would be just to lower the house $16,000. So,
yeah,
a lot of seasoned professionals don't realize that and don't have the wherewithal to look at that. So anyway, whatever that's worth.
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, very good. Brian, is there anything else that you think that if you're a home buyer or you're a potential home buyer and you're considering buying a home right now, maybe you need a home, but you're thinking, man, it's just so expensive. You've been, dissuaded by the news and different things. Obviously, we've covered, all kinds of different things on the show today and other times, but is there anything that you would pass on to buyers right now to help them understand what is really possible in this market?
It's literally, it's the easiest time to buy a house right now than it's been in the last 5 years. I think a lot of people are sitting
Why
on
is
this.
that?
Well, I think it's a combination of rates being up a little bit and less competition, right? When rates are at 7 or 8%, there's a lot less buyers than when rates are at 3 and 4 and 5%.
A whole lot less, yeah.
A lot
The
less.
competition is really reduced.
Right. My fear is that, and I think this is legit. There's another woman who's famous in New York. Her name's Barbara Corcoran. You can go find her. She was on Good Morning America recently, and she predicts as soon as rates get back into the fives, we're going to see a 10 to 15% increase in price. So, if that happens over the next 12 months, it's going to literally be, all of this pent up demand. We've talked about this before on the show. Like, it's going to be a crazy year. The experts are thinking 2025 could be the second or third largest volume year for real estate in history. If that's the case, it's going to be really hard for buyers to get into the market without overpaying, right? All of these things we've seen in the past with appraisal gaps and, issues getting your inspection items looked at and things like that. So, the only downside to buying a house right now is that rates are higher than they once were. That's it. Everything else is in positive territory. So if we look at subsidizing, like we talked about, just to get your foot in the door for a little while, let's cross our fingers. Rates are going to come down. A lot of people believe that that's going to happen. Me being one of them. It's the times now to kind of jump in. And I'm not a high pressure guy by any means. I'm just trying to share some data.
Well, I was just going to say along those lines. I mean, you and I, if people know us personally, we're not the kind of people who would tell you like, it might be a great time to buy, but it's with the caveat of, if it's affordable for you, if you can actually afford it, right? It doesn't make sense to buy something that you can't afford.
Right.
And that is obviously a real concern for a lot of folks. So again, if we visit the idea of a seller subsidy or slash, rate buy down, that's a consideration. But when a buyer comes through a home, they fall in love with it, they really like it. You're right. They might be sometimes the only people or, just one of a smaller handful of people who are interested. They may be able to get a seller subsidy to contribute to their affordability factor. And then they may be able to have, I'm seeing this all the time right now. Inspection items that like just a year and a half, 2 years ago, people were saying, I will buy the house, I'll inspect it, but I'm not going to get anything done. I'm not going to ask you for anything. Right now, buyers are getting those things done. So you're also not having to buy a house that you really have to worry about. Like you're getting stuck with a house that has issues, but you'll take it anyway. Right. You're getting a house that has issues that probably the seller is willing to fix or address or credit you for. Yep. So that does make it a phenomenal time to, from a competition standpoint to, if you can afford it, again, with that caveat, if you can afford it, to be in the market right now. So.
Agree. And one more little add here. I in the bottom of my heart, I don't think that affordability is going to get any better. I don't think a year or two from now it's going to be any easier from an affordability.
Well, the numbers pencil out that way. That's for sure. There may be maybe there's a short transition of time where that demand is still, people haven't decided to pounce yet. When maybe rates start relaxing and nobody's pounced yet, but it's going to be really short lived because the second that all this pent up demand. I mean, people. if you look at who's moving right now, it's the people only that have to move, right? And the tougher things get, the less and less people have to move, in some ways, right? So people that want to move but they can't, they just put it on the sidelines. Well, as soon as that, there's some relief in sight, more people will say, well, I don't have to move, but I kind of want to move. And we've been talking about this for a long time, and maybe we go. That's going to add more and more buyers to the buyer pool, and the competition starts to stiffen. And the more competition there is, the more prices just go up. So that's a good point that you make, that affordability may not necessarily improve. That's not necessarily awesome news, but again, if that's the case, buy while things are being offered by sellers. So that's, something to really consider. And
overall affordability, especially if folks have got debt. We look at this thing called blended rate. If there's any sort of, car payments and credit card balances and things like that, I mean, there's so many wonderful tools that we can use to kind of help when people get stuck on their 3% rate. I literally just put they had $300,000 to put down on their new house, and they were freaked out. But we used a bunch of that to pay some stuff off. They actually netted by selling a house at 600 and buying at 900. They improved, even getting rid of their 3.25% rate, and bought a house 300 grand more at 9%. $900,000 at 7.5%. They improved their overall output every month by $97.
Really, wow.
Yeah, it's really slick. So that's what I mean.
And those are the things. Those are the things that we always encourage people just to have a conversation with us. Yep. You are never obligated. You can call us, and there's no obligation to continue to work with us, or if you're just exploring options, you want to talk about things that you hear about here, things that you're hearing about on the news and wherever else. Let's make some considerations. Ultimately, I'm a real estate consultant, and essentially, you're probably a mortgage consultant, right? I mean, you're there to consult people, not to talk them into doing anything that they're uncomfortable with. Right. So, if we can consult you and help shed light on what's really the case, what's really going on with the real estate market, what's really happening in mortgages, what are the advantages, like the one that you just talked about, where somebody's able to sell a house for less expensive that has a much more desirable rate on it, and still liquidate and pay off some things and still come out ahead by buying a much more expensive house. That's a huge win. And people don't know that if they don't have the courage to call you and have that conversation. And if they call you and have that conversation and that's not the picture that you're able to paint for them, and so be it. But you don't know that just sitting on the sidelines, not calling and asking. So very good. Well, thanks again, Brian. Hopefully this has been helpful for anybody who's watching and listening, and talk to you later.